My wife betrayed me. I found out about it from her text messages where she asked him to ride her, and when I filed for divorce, my parents took her side. Rebecca, my wife of 9 years, decided to unwind after dinner last evening. She headed to the living room to watch her favorite shows while I watched the Mavericks game and handled some work tasks. By the time I checked on her at 1 a.m., she had finished 2 bottles of wine and was asleep on the couch. Just as I was about to bring her to bed, her smartwatch buzzed with a message. It read, "Ha ha, I can't do that, my partner would freak out." Intrigued, I tapped on it and found a conversation between Rebecca and a man I know, Alan. Alan isn't a close friend, but we've known each other since our teenage years. We've shared beers and played basketball together for years. We nicknamed him Coat Keeper because he always held everyone's jackets during our teenage brawls. I scrolled up the chat on her watch. From what I could see, he initiated the conversation unless she deleted some messages. There was a lot of flirting and winking, but nothing overtly cheating until last night when she started asking him for sex while intoxicated. My eyes widened in disbelief. She mentioned how much she had always wanted him, assured him nobody would find out, and claimed she was excellent at keeping secrets. I don't know her phone passcode, so I couldn't dig deeper. I took her to bed and then sat in the kitchen stunned until I fell asleep. I woke up at 6:30 for work, but I couldn't face the day. I slumped over the wheel of my work truck and then went back inside to grab a half-finished whiskey bottle, mixed it with soda, and walked along the abandoned railway line nearby. Sitting beneath a train bridge, seething with rage, I tried to make sense of everything. What should I do now? After reading those messages, I can't bear to look at her or talk to her. My heart feels like it's been pierced by a dagger. Seeing her beg like that has dissolved any love I had for her. I want to ghost her, to never speak to her again. The line, "am great at keeping secrets," haunts me. Who is she? The question is, how far should I dig into this rabbit hole? Honestly, I have no interest. I'm just done. I've never felt so let down and disappointed in my life. I've given her so much, both personally and as a partner. I loved her deeply and believed she represented goodness, which, by extension, reflected on me. Knowing she is a backstabbing snake makes me feel tainted as well. I feel worse than I did yesterday. It's like discovering that a mentor you looked up to who gave you life lessons turned out to be a pedophile or rapist. Your entire perception of yourself and your identity collapses. I'm rambling now. I apologize. We live in my parents' house, which they moved out of 7 years ago to live in a retirement village. When they pass, the house will be mine, but I don't want to stay here for long. My soon-to-be ex-wife won't get her hands on it when we divorce. So, what's my next move? I could kick her out and say nothing. I even considered asking my friend, a locksmith, to change the locks today subtly. I could come up with an excuse about the doors breaking, and as long as I'm around, she wouldn't care. Once the locks are changed, I could lock the front door, lure her outside, and then lock her out. But that seems juvenile and not quite right. I really don't know what to do. Right now, I'm staring at a bottle, feeling like my life has been ripped apart. As for that jerk Alan, he definitely knew what he was doing. I'll be seeing him soon, and he will be holding his face instead of Coates. To cool off, I went to a friend's house and threw the alcohol away. Her texts have been asking where I am because my work truck is still in the driveway. I got a lift to work and told her the truck had engine trouble. Tonight, I'll make my move. Update. Thanks to everyone who reached out after my initial post. I truly appreciate it. Yesterday, after posting, 2 dog walkers saw me and came over to check on me as I clearly looked distressed. Talking to them helped calm me down. I threw away the alcohol, called a friend, and he invited me to his place to cool off. He told me where the spare key was since he was at work. Our small town of around 250,000 people isn't very spread out. Once I arrived, I sat on his couch trying to calm down. Rebecca texted and called me multiple times in the morning, asking where I was and what was going on because my work truck was still in the driveway and I was nowhere to be seen. She seemed to buy my text about the engine trouble, so I got a ride to work. She just responded with an okay. Around 7:00 p.m., when my friend returned from work, I told him everything that had happened and asked for his opinion. I also asked him not to tell anyone about Alan as I didn't want Rebecca to be tipped off. I would deal with him later. By that, I mean exposing his true nature. Knocking him out won't help right now. For those saying he did nothing wrong, he messaged my wife first and was flirtatious. Why is he texting my wife in the first place? They barely know each other. My friend convinced me to keep a low profile and see what I could find out. I also spoke with a lawyer and started exploring my options. Around 8:00 p.m., he brought me home, and by then, I was exhausted. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving me drained. Rebecca immediately started asking questions about work as soon as I walked through the door. She claimed she had found my large flask in my lunch bag in the front seat and sensed something was wrong. I was too tired to lie. Yes, something is wrong. Last night, when I was putting your drunk self to bed, a message popped up on your smartwatch. I read it along with all the others. You're a disgusting cheat. I want nothing more to do with you. I couldn't be bothered to pretend anymore. Her demeanor shifted from confrontational to a terrified child in seconds. She started crying, and I just turned away to head upstairs to shower. Good at keeping secrets, huh? Begging that little rat for sex, huh? Yep, I read it all. She was still sobbing when I came out, seated on the top step, and the excuses started immediately: how she was drunk, weak, had never done anything like that before, how he messaged her first, and it meant nothing. She never intended to follow through. Almost as if she had a script, she said everything someone on here predicted. She didn't try to blame me either. She probably knew I would have thrown her out right then if she had. I told her I wanted a divorce and for her to be out of the house in a month. She was to move into the guest room. Since then, I've been mostly ignoring her. I just glare at her and shake my head when she starts talking nonsense. I don't want to hear it. Last night she slept in the guest room today. I've barely spoken to her. Maybe she'll be gone when I get back from work if I'm lucky, but my luck isn't great. My mother insisted I shouldn't throw her out on the street when I told her parents what was happening today. My mother and she have always been close. We've been together for almost 13 years. My mother said we should handle it like adults, considering how much we've been through together, and that it was only words. She totally sided with Rebecca instead. It surprised me. Maybe this mess will end up destroying me. If my mother objects, do I have any right to ask her to leave? When my parents pass, it will be literally my house. I did nothing wrong, so I'm not leaving. This could turn into War of the Roses Part 2. I'm visiting a divorce attorney next week to discuss my options. Until then, I'll ignore my soon-to-be ex-wife. She probably won't confess anything else now. I'll never know if she was just chatting or if she planned to have an affair. Sorry for the slow update. I've just had time to write this now as I finish work. Update. The situation has been miserable since I found out Rebecca was trying to cheat on me with Alan 22 days ago. She's been sleeping in the guest room, and it's clear she doesn't intend to leave after she got into my mother's ear. I gave her a month to go. Although she has nowhere else to go, it's not my concern. I've seen my divorce attorney several times and am working on a divorce petition. I've also opened my own bank account and taken half the money from our joint account. The house has an unusual atmosphere now. We both spend most of our time in our rooms, and the living room has become a no-man's land. I've been working late a lot to avoid interacting with her. After learning about the 180, I've started following it and have been cordial, if a little cold, toward her. I'm glad I did this because I felt like a monster rejecting her existence. It wasn't the right way to act, and instead, I felt like the one who had wronged her. Last week, I broke from the 180 when I found her crying on the bathroom floor. I helped her up and gave her a comforting hug, but it was more of a there hug than one with affection. I'm so wary of her now that I wouldn't put it past her to have staged the scene. This is the toxic environment I'm living in. She's been saying she'll do anything to save this marriage and that it was a careless mistake. So I mentioned a lie detector test. I have no intention of following through with it. I wouldn't even know where to start. I just wanted to see her reaction. She agreed to it initially, but a few hours later she came to me with a tablet in hand, complaining about the inaccuracy of lie detectors and how anxiety and stress can produce false readings. With her anxiety issues, she said, they would be unreliable. I chuckled. It wasn't even a real laugh, more of a cynical giggle. She'll do anything to save the marriage except take a lie detector test, but it doesn't matter. I meant what I said in my initial post. Every ounce of love I had for her vanished when I read those messages. She's no longer the person I trusted with my life. She's not my true love. I see her as garbage that needs to be taken out before it stinks up the place. Since I told our friend group about Alan, he's been shunned. He has no friends left among us. He blocked my number and ignored my calls. That little rat. I hope it was worth it. I confronted my mother about siding with Rebecca. What was she expecting us to do? Live as if nothing happened and coexist like neighbors? It's absurd. My mother said Rebecca is the daughter she never had but always wanted. Before I was born, my mother had a stillborn daughter, and she's clung to Rebecca since we first met. They have a close relationship, as I mentioned earlier. Rebecca doesn't have many friends, and my mother thinks it's unacceptable for her to be alone, especially during a pandemic. She wants us to try couples counseling before throwing in the towel. I'm not doing that. The thought of sharing Christmas with Rebecca in the same house makes me sick. She'll want to do it just like every year. It'll be a whole production. My dad has always been quiet, just there. The word that counts in our family has always come from my mother. People here have been saying that it's now a question of my wife or me for my parents, and that I'm selfish and spoiled since it's not my house and I have no right to make demands. If it comes to it, I'm prepared to walk out and never come back. Someone has to uphold their word in this mess, and I need to look at myself in the mirror with some self-respect. If I leave, a friend has offered me a place to stay for a few weeks until I get myself sorted. But if I do go, I'm done with my parents. I'll never speak to them again. They'll likely see it as me giving up on them, walking away without trying to fix things. I see it as them choosing someone who hurt me over their own son. If I'm gone, what's the plan? Just Rebecca staying there alone while my parents tend to a backstabber? After we got married, my parents let us live in their house for a year. It was meant to be a late wedding gift. Over the years, I've spent tens of thousands on it. I dream of leaving it all behind, going somewhere new and starting over. But I don't know where else to go. I've lived in this town all my life. Am I being too harsh here? I'm practically ready to cut my parents out of my life. Why am I the one who has to leave everything behind? I've always believed that good things come to good people. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought. Maybe I deserve everything I'm getting. Wednesday, December 4th, this morning, I stopped calling that house home. Knowing Rebecca would be gone for a few hours for a hospital appointment, I used the time to pack my things and leave. I left the house keys on the kitchen table along with the divorce papers from my lawyer and was on my way. I've blocked Rebecca's and my mother's numbers. Any future communication with Rebecca will go through my lawyer. I'm staying with a friend for a week or two, but I hope to have my own place before Christmas. I haven't spoken to my parents in weeks. Our last communication was via text, where I explained to my mother why what Rebecca said to Alan hurt so much. She responded by saying she would let me cool off but couldn't talk to me when I was like this. A few days ago she tried calling me, but I declined. Today I blocked her number. My parents have let me down more than Rebecca's betrayal. During tough times, you turn to family for support to be your rock. My parents have made me feel like I'm overreacting, like I'm the one tearing the family apart. But I'm not. They made their choice when I asked them to lift mountains for me to get my unfaithful wife out of the house. My father had the chance to stand up for me but didn't. You make your choices and live with them. People have said I gave up too easily, that I didn't love Rebecca enough to fight for our marriage, but that's not true. I loved Rebecca more than anyone on this planet, and discovering her betrayal shattered me. We all have limits, and once those are crossed, things change irrevocably. Reading those messages broke something inside me. Like waking up from a trance, my feelings for her vanished. Everything after that was just delaying the inevitable. Since I left, I have to admit I'm curious about my parents' relationship with Rebecca. Now that contact with their son is severed, will they continue to support her? As for me, I'd love to travel. Rebecca hated flying, so most of our trips were to nearby places. I'd love to visit overseas again. 14 years ago, I went to Spain on a friend's trip. Once this pandemic cools down, I have my sights on the States. I'd love to see a bit of America. Update. As I last posted here more than 7 months ago, I thought that was it for me. I had made my decisions, but this morning I received a call that dragged me back into the mud. I wanted Rebecca out of my life, and I had no intention of reconciling. Walking away from my house that was to be bequeathed to me by my parents and cutting ties with them as they sided with my wife over me. This morning, a friend called me to say my dad was trying to get in touch because my mother is not well, and he asked if he could give him my number. I agreed. My dad called to tell me Mom is in the hospital, stable but not great. He was the most emotional I've ever heard him. He said Mom really wants to see me and asked if I'd meet him at the hospital. I agreed, and we set a time. I couldn't focus at work and eventually went home. Now I'm anxious, wondering if I made the right decision. I feel like I'm walking into a burning building, blind and unsure where the exits are. Why does she want to talk to me now? Has she had a change of heart? It seems unlikely. Is Rachel going to be there? I don't want to see her. I still resent what my parents did and how they sided with my unfaithful wife. Despite my hesitation, it'll go. I need closure. I'm climbing the walls, feeling anxious and out of control. Any advice would be much appreciated. Sorry for the late update. I've been trying to process what happened. I did end up visiting the hospital on Wednesday night. I almost backed out at the last minute, but I needed closure. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, I felt paranoid, half expecting Rachel to jump out. My dad tried to hug me at the door, but it felt awkward, so I turned away. I told him I would leave if Rachel was there, and he assured me she wasn't. We went to Mom's ward. Seeing her so frail was terrifying. She had a severe black eye, bruises, and purple yellowing on one side of her face. She fell and broke 2 ribs, shattered her elbow, and hit her head. She seemed dead until she saw me. She said she missed me and wasn't sure she would ever see me again. I told her she could have contacted me if she really wanted to. We talked about her fall, how she was down for a few hours before my dad found her, and how she wanted to mend our relationship. I mentioned Rachel and that I had filed for divorce, but she was either ignoring the letters or not getting them. I asked if Rachel still lived in the house. Mom said she did, and Dad looked uncomfortable. I turned away in disgust. Mom started saying Rachel is lost without me and not in good health. I realized nothing had changed. She just wants things back to the way they were. I told her I don't want the house. She said it's my house and always will be, but it means nothing to me now. I stayed for less than an hour. Before I left, I said I might be in touch, but not to expect a call anytime soon. Dad asked if I would stay in touch with him. I said I would. Right or wrong, I'm not sure. Time will tell. My feelings were erratic when I got home, but I'm glad I went. I couldn't help but think of Rachel and what she once meant to me. The past 8 months have been a blur. Now that I'm gone, I have to admit that the nature of their relationship interests me. Are my parents going to keep supporting her now that their son is out of the picture? I'd love to travel. Rebecca hated flying, so most of our trips were local. I'd love to visit overseas again. 14 years ago, I went to Spain with friends. Once this pandemic cools down, I have my sights on the States. I'd love to see a bit of America. Update. As I posted 7 months ago, I thought I was done here. I made my decisions, but this morning a call dragged me back into the mud. I wanted Rebecca out of my life, but I had no intention of reconciling. Walking away from my house that my parents intended to bequeath to me and severing ties with them because they sided with my wife over me. This morning, a friend called to say my dad was trying to reach me because my mother is not well and asked if he could give him my number. I agreed. My dad called to tell me my mom is in the hospital, stable but not great. He was the most emotional I've ever heard him. He said my mom really wants to see me and asked if I'd meet him at the hospital. I agreed, and we set a time. Sorry for the late update. I've been trying to process what happened. I did end up visiting the hospital on Wednesday night. I almost backed out at the last minute, but I needed closure. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, I felt paranoid, half expecting Rachel to jump out. My dad tried to hug me at the door, but it felt awkward, so I turned away. I told him I would leave if Rachel was there, and he assured me she wasn't. We went to Mom's ward. Seeing her so frail was terrifying. She had a severe black eye, bruises, and purple yellowing on one side of her face. She fell and broke 2 ribs, shattered her elbow, and hit her head. She seemed dead until she saw me. She said she missed me and wasn't sure she would ever see me again. I told her she could have contacted me if she really wanted to. We talked about her fall, how she was down for a few hours before my dad found her, and how she wanted to mend our relationship. I mentioned Rachel and that I had filed for divorce, but she was either ignoring the letters or not getting them. I asked if Rachel still lived in the house. Mom said she did, and Dad looked uncomfortable. I turned away in disgust. Mom started saying Rachel is lost without me and not in good health. I realized nothing had changed. She just wants things back to the way they were. I told her I don't want the house. She said it's my house and always will be, but it means nothing to me now. I stayed for less than an hour. Before I left, I said I might be in touch, but not to expect a call anytime soon. Dad asked if I would stay in touch with him. I said I would. Right or wrong, I'm not sure. Time will tell. My feelings were erratic when I got home, but I'm glad I went. I couldn't help but think of Rachel and what she once meant to me. The past 8 months have been a blur. Now that I'm gone, I have to admit that the nature of their relationship interests me. Are my parents going to keep supporting her now that their son is out of the picture? I'd love to travel. Rebecca hated flying, so most of our trips were local. I'd love to visit overseas again. 14 years ago, I went to Spain with friends. Once this pandemic cools down, I have my sights on the States. I'd love to see a bit of America. Update first, in terms of the divorce from Rebecca, I am now in the home stretch. She signed the divorce papers and the legalities remain. She messaged me through my dad, saying she felt she could fix things, but now realizes she cannot and needs to move on for her well-being. She apologized for not letting me move on. I appreciate her sense of reality. She claimed she would move out of the house when she could get on her feet and didn't want anything in the divorce. I'm fine with this. As for my mother, I haven't spoken to her yet, but my dad mentioned she is doing much better after leaving the hospital and returning to some normalcy. How things will turn out with them remains to be seen. I have advised them to put the house in my name to provide some security. We'll see how that turns out. My mental struggle to move past everything that has happened is the toughest challenge ahead. The brain is a fantastic yet terrible thing. For instance, I still taste the truffles I laughed at and then threw up at my grandmother's house when I was 5. Though I never ate truffles again 30 years later, I can still taste them. I realize I don't want to carry ideas, emotions, and beliefs about what has happened 30 years down the road. I don't want to be one of those elderly people whose suffering has knocked away something good. You hear about such people how they used to be decent, kind, or funny, but somewhere along the way, events change them into someone they never intended to be. I don't want to be that person. I have to let this pain pass before it consumes me. Starting therapy and consulting a psychiatrist has been beneficial for me. Honest communication about everything has been healing. Something my doctor said resonated with me. She remarked, "Your best years are the years you've got left." What I believe she meant was that the past is gone, and apart from your thoughts, it doesn't exist. The here and now does, however, and you can choose to live in a past that isn't real to anyone else except you, or make the most of it. I will try to remember this when I am down. I wanted to travel, and that is finally happening. A friend promised to accompany me. We have a trip to Los Angeles for a week at the start of October. I'm truly excited about it. I've always wanted to visit Los Angeles in the fall. It brings to mind the movie You've Got Mail. This trip is just the beginning of my adventures. Memories of adventures I experienced overseas should abound in my later 30s. That's the plan. For the first time in what seems like a very long time, I wake up with hope in my heart and a spring in my step. If this isn't progress, I don't know what is. Hello. I thought it would be appropriate to offer one last update and wrap things up here because it has been a year since I shared my story. I am officially divorced. It feels like a weight has been lifted, but it also marks the end of over 30% of my life. About a month ago, after visiting a friend, I saw Rachel for the first time since last January while walking into a store in the town center. As I was stepping in, she was opening the door to leave. We made eye contact. Even though we were both wearing masks, I recognized her immediately. She said something I couldn't understand, and we just looked at each other for a few seconds before I went inside. A wave of extreme gloom washed over me as I browsed the store, and I had to stop to gather myself. It proves that one glance can take you back to square one. Do I miss her? Not really. I miss the person I thought she was, but if she ever existed, that person is gone. Still, I don't wish her harm or suffering, not at all. I refuse to carry hatred in my heart any longer. In the long run, it would only burden me. A friend's girlfriend told me she was convinced she spotted Rachel outside a pub a couple of years ago, all over another guy. She never told my friend or me because she didn't want to interfere and wasn't sure it was her. It irritates me because I could have done something years ago with that knowledge. Though it's not definitive, I could have found out if she was out that evening and saved myself a lot of pain down the road. I now understand why I never liked her. One of the reasons we planned a trip to Los Angeles in October was because travel restrictions between the USA and UK were expected to ease in September for fully vaccinated passengers. Unfortunately, that has been pushed to November 8th, casting our plans in doubt. My friend can't take time off from work until the new year, so if I go, I'll have to go alone, which is disappointing. Still, I am keen on spending the new year with him. I need to give it more thought. This pandemic has thrown many curveballs, so I can't complain or claim surprise. Still, I'll make it happen somehow. Regarding my parents, I struggle with total disinterest. No matter how hard I try, I doubt it will change. My dad has tried to mend the relationship, but I no longer care. It sounds harsh, but it's the reality. In my last post, I mentioned wanting them to list the house in my name. Although I was annoyed at the time and tried to establish some control, I don't care about the house anymore. Living in the house from Nightmare on Elm Street would be preferable to living there. Nothing would change unless it becomes a time-traveling house or undoes what they did. It's just the sad result of their choices. Please don't forgive a cheater, to anyone considering it. You're flogging a dead horse. Don't become the person frantically trying to extinguish flames set by your unfaithful partner as they happily reignite them. Having gone through everything that has transpired and reading a lot of infidelity support groups in the past year, I feel stronger than ever. If you don't cut your losses, you're in for a world of hurt. Sort of a related story, but at the beginning of the year, I had a terrifying incident. I cut the back of my pant leg on a metal dumpster at work. I didn't realize it had resulted in a cut until I got home and felt strange going to bed. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up with pulsing in my leg, feeling deathly sick, seeing double, and experiencing vertigo. Alternating between a strong fever and chills, I called an ambulance, which they said would take 2 hours. I was hyperventilating and panicking. Then, for some reason, I just stopped feeling terrified. I realized I might die, and everything got simple and peaceful. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. When I consider betrayal and adultery, I see great similarity. You have to accept that what you had is gone. It's long gone. Fighting an unwinnable war is pointless. Is the suffering worth it? I don't think so. Once you accept that it's over, things become clearer. That's just my perspective.